So for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Knight of Pentacles. And the first thing I want to do here is I want to take a look at all of the Knights from the Waite deck and just kind of put them out here and just look at their overall energy as we go from the Knight of Swords all the way down to the Knight of Pentacles. And as you can see, the energy slows down. We have high energy starting with the Knight of Swords, and then we have a much lower, pretty much stopped energy with the Knight of Pentacles. And this really represents the evolution of the Knights. There are different, I guess there's different scenarios for each situation. I'm not saying that one energy is better than the other, but what I'm saying is that there are times where you really want to slow down and analyze the situation before you really take that next step. And I think that the Knight of Pentacles excels at that, and that if you get this card in a reading, it's telling you to do several things. So first of all, if we look at the Tarot of the Mystic Sea right here, it says evolution. So it's saying change your pattern, change whatever you've been doing. What is that dynamic in your life that's been going on again and again? Look at modifying that. And he's jumping off of a cliff here. So to me, that brings to mind the idea of look before you leap, to think before you make a commitment. Every situation will vary, but I like on the neon moon here, how this guy, he seems like he has a very important job. Seems like he's really looking at all the details of what's going on with a situation, but he hasn't made any sort of attempt to do any work yet. He has all of this equipment in the background, but he's just taking the time to process, taking the time to take a look at it, sitting with the information, bouncing it around in his head and trying to figure out what direction to go in. And I think that there are things in life that can be traditions that we continue to have in our lives, but then they don't serve a purpose. They can be streamlined. That happened to me a lot in the military. Even as a teacher, I run into that a lot. When I was in the military, we had times where there wasn't anything to do, but there was this fear of being idle. There was this fear of just sitting and processing and thinking about the day and planning things out. It was always, you have to find something, even if that thing you're doing doesn't really have a purpose or a goal. It was just this concept of looking busy. And that was one of the things that really frustrated me about being in that entire system. I remember one day where we were standing around and they gave us rakes to rake a field, and this field was just full of rocks. And by the time we were different, that field looked no different than it did when we started. But all of the higher ups were happy because they felt like we did something. We, earned our day's pay or whatever, but we didn't accomplish anything. And these seem like minor things, but they compile and they build an atmosphere of being stuck in a rut. And the Knight of Pentacles likes routine, but does not like routine that makes them feel stuck. I think that freedom of thought and that ability to voice our opinions and to say when we feel like something is just not working is really important when it comes to making progress in life. And so I've been, I don't want to ramble on and on about that, but I think that we can be creative as well when it comes to making changes. And I love on the Surrealist Tarot how it really displays that creativity. There's a guy that's he's on a locust, or this insect that could potentially be something that destroys his crops, but he's made it something that is a part of a tool that he can use to cultivate this whole entire area. So I think that, I don't know, that's something that seems super creative to me, to take something that would be thought of as maybe your adversary or your obstacle or a challenge and using that to your advantage. So this card is connected to the Emperor and it's connected to the Hierophant. So it's connected to strategy with the Emperor. The Emperor is a ruler that rules by governing and thinking of ways to enhance the lives of the people around him. And he's someone that makes things happen. And also it's connected to, like I said, the Hierophant, which is about tradition. So when you combine those two things, you have an interesting way of looking at tradition. So if we look at the Tabula Mundi, we can see that connection. We can see that on the Tabula Mundi there, we have, for the Hierophant, we have those keys, and we also have the bull for Taurus. And then we have the compass and the square right there in the front of the chariot that he's riding for the emperor. So you can see, I love how the Tabula Mundi does that. It points us to those major arcana. There's another deck that I have that does that as well. It's the Hush Tarot. It makes that connection between the major arcana. And I'm not sure if it was done on purpose, but I noticed it and I wanted to point that out because even with decks that are not traditional, you will have those connections. So on the Knight of Pentacles, on the Hush Tarot, we have this bird and it's on a pair of hands and it also has a key sticking out. Now that key, of course, relates to the emperor, not to the emperor, but the Hierophant. And the hands, we can see that those hands are also on the emperor card. So it has combined those things. There's always growth in life. There's a growth that we have that connects us with our place in the universe. And as we grow, we begin to see a deeper connection to everything around us. And I love on the Star Tarot how it has these spirals. And these spirals that are on the shield and on the armor, those are spirals that they're symbolic of our growth and development, because as we grow, there are ups, there are downs, there are things that come back into our life that we have to replay and work in a different way from a different perspective and look at differently. But all these things allow us to get closer to those goals, closer to what it means to be connected to the universal ideal of who we are, the universal concept of why we're here and what our purpose is. And I love that those spirals are on this card, and they're also on the Tarot of the Spirit right here on the armor on the top. And there are several decks that have these spirals in it when it comes to the Knight of Pentacles, and I think that's the reason why. So when I do the court cards, sometimes I get messages about the order of the knight and the king, or the prince and the knight, depending on what system you're looking at. Now, I think that it doesn't really matter. I think that, like I was talking about earlier, how we can get stuck on tradition. We can get stuck on, okay, what is the meaning of this? But overall, what it comes down to is when you're using tarot, what works for you and how have you modified this and taken the time to think about it so that when you're using it, you're getting the best use out of it. And I appreciate your ability to think freely and to break free from any tradition that I might try to create and to go off on your own and to make it work for you. That's awesome. And so I just see it differently. And so I stick with this. And so I think that's the beauty of tarot. It's not a religion. It's not a dogmatic structure that we need to argue about or make any sort of, I don't know, deep opinions about. So I want to go ahead and talk about the element that is associated with this card. And if you haven't watched my videos in the past, I usually connect an element from the periodic table with the card that I'm working on. And I've been doing this over and over again, and it's been working for me. So it's not something that I really feel like I need to change. However, I will say this, if you've noticed in the last few videos, I've really been focusing on the connection between the name of the element and the characteristics of that element as it's associated with a person, because a lot of the elements now are connected to some individual. And I think that it's been working to do that. And so I'm not afraid to kind of change my system a little bit and not look so much at the properties of the element. And the reason why I've been able to do this and why I really had to do this is because as we get further down the periodic table to a lot of the heavier elements, they are very unstable, so they don't exist long enough for us to really use them in a lot of ways, mostly for research. So if you've noticed that, that is why I've taken that approach. And so that's been a lot of fun. I love exploring it like that. And so I think that it's a really important thing to take a look at. There's a lot of history there. And the element that this particular card is connected to is Copernicium, which is named after Copernicus. And Copernicus was a free thinker. He was something that we call a polymath. He looked at a lot of different areas of study. He looked at astronomy, astrology, math. He was a member of the clergy of the church. So he was someone that also translated a lot of text. So he was very much a patient person that took the time to really learn a lot of things. He started his studies, I think, early on in I think it's like 1490 something. And it wasn't until 1504 where he finally earned his degree in medicine. Now, at the time, medicine was very much connected to astrology. And I know it's hard to believe now, but it really was something that helped a lot to diagnose different parts of the body, ailments there. But these things changed, over time, and that's okay. So Copernicus was one of the people that was instrumental in that change. He was instrumental in a lot of changes. And what led him to make the changes in the connections with astrology was that he noticed that with the astronomy, there were some things that were off, like the position of Earth in relationship to the sun. And he developed a more heliocentric view of that. And it wasn't until, I think he started this in like 1504, 1504, but he didn't even finish his book and really present his book until right before he died. I think it was like 1534. So all of these years he was thinking about all of this because he wanted it to be right. He didn't want to bring in another tradition that was flawed, that we would latch on to, that we would continue to practice over and over again. He wanted to iron out a lot of the details. And I think that I really appreciate that, because there are, like I said, with my experience in the military, times where we can fall into those routines that we really frustrate us because we're not really moving towards a goal. And I think that as we continue to spiral towards those goals and make progress, analyzing a situation and making the best out of it is something that I think will make the biggest impact in the future. And I think that if we're thinking about making an impact and making changes, then being able to think freely is definitely a key. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. I know I kind of went on and on about some things, but I don't know. Hopefully this makes sense to you, and I'm very thankful for all of you. I appreciate, your feedback. I appreciate your comments, and yeah, so my name's Will. This is Atypical Tarot, and I'll see you next time.